Miss Diane's had another repositioning of her bed. The Princess Diane always wants to climb up high on stuff and hang out way up high. She was laying on this bulk cabinet right here, so I put her bed up there. She's got two beds, so she moves around. Her other bed is the Princess Castle, and she likes to go way up there. But this bed right here is the one that I had on top of the bulk cabinet, and it had been here for a couple months. And she must not have been paying enough attention whenever she was sleeping. She was sleeping there one night and she fell off there. And she fell down here. I come in here one morning and that bed was laying on the pressure washer. So I checked the cameras and found out that was what's happening. So I'm very glad that Miss Princess Diane is okay. I'll get that video and I'll show you. But just really glad she's all right. She checks on her fountain pretty often, make sure her fountain water's still pumping. And she'll definitely let you know if she runs out of food. I'll get that video of where she fell off there and show you. Really glad Miss Princess Diane is okay. Another thing that's been on my list for a while to try and deal with is Hoist out in my storage building. In one of my storage units, I've got a Hoist system. Let me show you what it looks like. Put this in years ago. There's a 4-inch I-beam that runs up and down both sides in here. And then there's a 4-inch I-beam going across there. You know, and it's on trolley, so it can move up and down from front to back in this unit. And that part, it's always worked fine. The hoist I originally put in here was that jet. That jet hoist is runs on 120 volt. And what I did was I always used it by just plugging it in. You know, I'd get an extension cord and I'd just plug it in to power, 120 volt power, single phase, and I ran it like that. If I want to lift that Commander 300, that half-ton jet won't lift it. So I've used this before. I've used that come-along to lift that Commander, and the Commander's even heavier than it used to be because I built that cage to protect it, and I put it in that cage and I set it up where it's got those light poles and those 3 high pressure sodium lights, so I can use it as a light plant if I needed to. But anyways, it's heavy enough that I would have to use that big come along if I wanted to lift it and trolley it back and forth in here. Well, the problem with both of these units is I don't have a lot of height in here to begin with, and they eat up a lot of height, you know, just in their self, just the way they're made. So I've been thinking for quite a while I wanted to build another hoist for in here with a winch. I use a winch. I use a 5,000 pound winch in the shop. Like if you've seen my hillbilly bridge crane in the main shop, it's a 5,000 pound winch, and these winches I'm using full disclaimer, these are not made to be used as hoists. If you build something like that, then you're probably kind of like me. I like tools and materials being used in ways for which they were never intended. But I only do that if there's a reason to do it. You know, the reason to use a winch where you probably should be using a hoist is, one is cost. The other problem that these AC powered hoists have is you got to get power to them. You know, and these hoists like this one right here, I've only got this where it runs straight up and down that I-beam. And that's all right, and it works with a cord that's being pulled along a cable with some eyelets that can slide. So as you move that hoist down through there, your power cord goes out straight, and then when you bring it back, you know, it kind of folds up like an accordion here, and that works fine. When this doesn't work is when you got to move your hoist like this one that moves in two directions. You know, this one not only trolleys all the way up and down the length of both of these beams, but it also moves this direction. Now this is when one of these winches are really come in great, because if you mount a battery up there, then that winch is carrying its own power. And the way I do it, obviously, I've got a charger on board, and overnight and different times when I'm not using the winch, I just plug it in and charge that battery. I've never had any issues with that one right there. I've never had a time, and it's been well over a year now that I've been using that, and I've never had a time when I needed to use it and the battery was dead. That marine battery that I've got up there, it's never even been close to being dead. Probably could use a much smaller battery for that. So we're talking about all that, and what we're into now, right here, is a winch, a 2,500 pound winch that I've already got. I had this and I was using it for something else, and I've also got these wheels like those trolleys have. You know, that's the same wheel that's on a trolley like those. I made something out of these that I was trolleying, and I can't remember what it was, but at some point I stopped using it and took it apart, and I saved these, and I saved the shafts so I can, you know, I have the right size shaft that fits the bearing, and the bearing fits these rollers. So I've got good rollers to use in order to make a base. And I've also got the wireless remote, and I just hooked this up to the winch and put power to it, and I got the remote in this thing. I pushed the button on the remote and this winch worked fine. So I'm going to go forward with working on building another winch setup as a hoist for that rig out there in that storage area. And the idea that I'm going to go with is I want to mount this winch on the side. Instead of having the winch below like I got right here, I want to mount the winch up on the side and then use a snatch block with this thing where my cable would come down, go through a snatch block, go back up to the other side and connect. So there'd be a lift eye or something that it's connected to, the end of the cable's connected to here. So your cable would come from your winch, come down, go through a snatch block, go back up and connect right there. So why would you do it that way? Why would you do it with the snatch block and put it on the side? Two reasons. One, it's going to double the power of the winch. The winch cable would move half speed and it would lift half as fast, but it would lift twice as much weight. That's what you gain with the one pulley with the snatch block. Another thing that's going to gain that is really good in this case is it's going to give me more height. Since my winch is up so high, the only thing that's going to exist below that beam is pretty much the snatch block that it's connected to. And if that snatch block's only 4 or 6 inches high, tall, then you can imagine how much space that's going to save me in compared to the type of hoists and come-alongs I'm using now. So let's get into this and see what we can come up with. Stacked them plates and tacked them together and drilled them. So these would be the holes that the pins for the rollers would go in, and I'll probably weld them in there because I can't machine the exact size to make this super tight. Closest I had was a 15/16, and it looks like it's going to work okay. And it's going to be good. I mean, but it's not so tight that you would beat it in there and it would stay. So I'll probably weld around the back side of that. This hole here would be like the hole on your hoist at the bottom that holds it together, where I'm going to put a threaded rod and hold it together. So it's a 1 inch for that 1 inch threaded rod. I've welded those pins in those holes, and I took my 1 inch rod and I welded a 3/4 pin on the end of it, and then I'm putting that through this hole. I'm going to weld that, and the reason I went down to 3/4 on the end of here is that's what's going to fit to fasten this hook to, where it's going to come back up and connect back to this rolling assembly. I cut a tube 4 1/8 of an inch in length because I wanted that to be the space in between these. And when I put this up here, I see that it's not letting it go all the way and touch the plate. This is going to take a little custom fit here. Grinding on just those flat spots and leaving the points long. See, now I've got contact with my plate and I've got clearance for the weld. And put that battery tray on there. I put that battery tray on that plate and that looks good. I put some holes in it. I can run a zip tie or something to hold the battery. Shouldn't be too much trouble holding that in place. This is the transmitter for the wireless remote, and the back plate of that was broke. I don't remember when it broke, but it's been broke for before this episode anyway. So I made a steel plate and I drilled it with the hole pattern that this back plate, this plastic back plate used to have. And I noticed a couple of screws held all right. A couple of screws didn't really hold in the plastic body of this that well. So I put tape around it. which makes it a lot more sexy. So I think I'll put the rollers on these now and take a look at that. So this winch would be going on the side of this other plate like this, but I'm going to have a nut. There's going to be a nut sticking out right here from my bolt that goes all the way through. So I need a little space because I wouldn't want that cable to hit that nut. I think this would give it plenty of space. So I'm going to put that tube on there just pretty much to space out the winch. And the winch has got holes here and right here to bolt that on there, but I'm just going to weld it to that plate. If you couldn't cut it off there very easy, you might not want to do that, but I think it would be just as easy for me to cut that winch off there as it would be to take the bolts out. So I'm going to position that tube on there, tack it, put the winch on there and tack it. And in a case like this, I want to mention with something like that winch, and a lot of other things that you weld on with an arc welder of any kind, you want to think about where your power's going. I wouldn't want to arc through that winch. I wouldn't want my ground clamp put anywhere on that winch to be welding. I would want to make sure that I was well grounded to this and make sure that that's not contacting something that it shouldn't when I'm welding. A lot of people on a vehicle or truck or a machine, they'll say, well, disconnect the battery. If somebody wants to disconnect the battery, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. I don't think it's a bad idea. Is it necessary? Look, this is what's necessary. When you're messing with anything electrical, put your ground clamp right on the raw steel that you want to weld on. Start your arc on that raw steel. No matter what's electrical from there, if you've got clean metal connected to your ground clamp and you start your arc on that metal and weld, I don't care how electrical the damn thing is or how many computers is in it, it's very unlikely that that power is going to affect that computer. Now obviously, especially with stick welding, you can goof and you could have your welding rod touch up here. And it'll, if it goes through that motor, something could happen. It could arc across something that you don't want it to. I say that's especially possible with stick welding because your stick welder's hot all the time. MIG welder's only hot when you pull a trigger. But put your ground clamp on the raw piece of steel that you're welding. Put it in a place that's clean where you know it's going to go through there. And if you're welding, like if I'm going to weld this on there, I'm going to make sure I start my arc on this raw steel and then come over onto the winch so that stuff's not going where I don't want it to go. Starting to get a look at what this thing's going to look like put together. Put that transmitter right here and tack that plate on. So I got to hook these wires to the battery.
Got a pretty silly mistake here, but it's one that's definitely easy to fix. I was thinking whenever I cut that tube for a spacer, I knew that the flange of this 4-inch I-beam was 4 1/8, and I cut that spacer at 4 1/8. Yeah, the bottom flange of the beam is 4 1/8. But my spacer would also have to allow for the amount that these rollers hold this plate out. So this 4 1/8 isn't anywhere near long enough. I just need to cut another spacer for that. This tube here, that's not going to work. I was just thinking how on the other hoist they make up for that spacing with all these washers. So with all the hoists I've fooled with, I've ended up with a whole bunch of these washers. So I'm not going to cut another spacer. I'm just going to take this out there, and I'm just going to use however many of these washers I need to get that right. I got plenty of them.
So see, we got the winch, the transmitter, the battery back here. It's all wired up. I put those washers in there. Put those washers in there for the space, and I got that distance right. And I had a problem when I tried to lift with it. The plates really on the side, they just weren't strong enough, and the plate, this plate, it was trying to bend, and the fact that those rollers are kind of cone shaped, you know, they're made for S beams or I beams, but that made that condition worse. And I probably would have had to rebuild the thing, just because, you know, so much of the body of it was made of those plates that weren't strong enough. If you look at most of these other trolleys, see right there, we got probably 3/8 inch plate. And I used quarter. And another thing is, what I used is definitely mild steel. And that's something you might think about when you're building stuff and comparing it to something that's been mass produced, because in a lot of cases, they're not using mild steel. They're using a higher tensile strength steel. And for them, you know, when they're buying it in big quantities and getting a good price on it because they're buying so much because they're mass producing stuff, it's cheaper for them to use a higher tensile strength steel and, you know, a better grade of steel. Just the amount of money they spend hauling it around. Higher tensile strength steel, for its strength, is lighter. So, I mean, everything about it helps if you're doing mass produced stuff. But yeah, I used that 1/4 inch plate, and it kind of, when it lifted, it flexed, and that condition was made worse because my spool is so far from the center of here, where I'm trying to get more height. You know, that's why I put the winch where I did. You can look, if you see the elevation of that hook right there, how high it'll lift in comparison to this AC powered hoist. You know, with the chain bag and all, I can only run that hook up to here. If I smashed into the chain bag, I could only run the hook up to here. So you can see how this rig will lift a lot higher in an area like this, where overall you got not much overhead room. And so what I did, let me climb up here. I did something to fix this that kind of weird, the way I put these round bars over the top. That stiffened that up great. And there's no, with those round bars on there, there's never going to be an issue with that flexing anymore. But obviously, the way I welded those round bars on there, you know, I just bent them things quick and put them on there and zap welded them on there. You can't get this thing off. It's pretty much, you know, normally with these trolleys, you know, you can take that bolt apart that goes through there and take them off there. And this one ain't like that. And you know, that's no big deal for me, because it wouldn't take me but no time to cut this loose and get it off there. And I don't see myself taking it off there anyway. Just something I put together to use, you know, and it's all made out of stuff I had around here. But I guess you're probably gonna want to see it lift some weight. So let's do that. So I'm hooked up to the Commander, this Lincoln Commander 300. This was the welding machine I bought when I went into business back around beginning of the year 2000. It's a diesel machine, got a 3-cylinder Dutch diesel engine in it. I built this cage for it, and it's got your welding cables, your remote. There's 3 400-watt high-pressure sodium lights on poles here that I can use my forklift and put on this union. If I put the poles together and put on that hammer union, you can use it as a light plant. Got a 100-foot paracord here in the back. And I would say what we're looking at right here weight-wise is at least 2,500 pounds, at least. And one of the things, now this is a 2,500 winch, and I do have it snatch blocked, but one of the things you got to remember about these winches are rated on the first wrap, meaning the very first wrap of cable on there. And I'm on the third wrap. I've removed some of the cable from this one, but that cable's really long. And what I mean by saying I'm on the third wrap is, if you were looking all the way to the right there, that's where the cable is connected, and that cable's reeled all the way across this way, then back that way, and right now it's about to start heading back the next way. So when I first lift right here, I'd probably be on the second wrap, and you know, once that starts lifting, it would be on the third wrap. So will it lift it? I'll turn the remote on. This is a type where you hold the button down. There, it's on. That is all she wants, boys. It's all she wants, but it'll lift it. It's not only lifting it, but it's holding it there, which is impressive. That magnetic brake is holding that baby. So I could, you know, I could trolley this thing back and forth in here. All right, well, cool. That thing works. I like it. Let's set her down. I want to get this where I'm holding it where I want it. There we go, she's down. So here, just on a last note, you know, that's the winch hoist gizmo thrown together. And this is the AC powered half-ton jet hoist. Now this is actually a hoist. And this is meant to hoist. The winch is not. And I want to make that clear. This is far safer to hoist with. This AC unit right here would definitely safely hold far, far more than it would ever lift. But that big unit right there, which cost a tremendous amount of money compared to a winch, that big unit right there will not lift that Commander. I'm telling you right now, it won't do it. Even if you snatch block it, it struggles to lift it. So, you know, when we're looking at lift height, when we've got limited area in here, we're looking at cost, looking at the amount of space that thing takes up, and the fact that I have to bring the cord over here and plug it in to make it work. It makes one of these pretty appealing, but you just got to keep in mind that you can't be lifting stuff with this where you're going to be working around things that might you know, be dangerous if something happens and it gets to fall. I'm not afraid if I want to lift this welder up 2 inches off the floor to trolley it towards the door to grab it with a forklift. I'm not afraid if something breaks. I'm not going to get under it, and if it falls, it's going to fall on those rubber feet, and it's probably not even going to hurt the machine. Those are actually rubber curbs, you know, like for a parking lot, and you know, they make really good feet for something like that. But overall, I'm just saying that safety-wise, you know, this is way better. But if you got your head screwed on straight with what you're doing, this is fine. And that thing right there, I mean, it'll lift. So, all right. That's it for that.